Alright, today we're going to go through tutorials on how to build a painted Morris style chair with a slightly distressed edge. This will be a multi-part series, and I'll try to go through kind of step by step what I'm going to do to help you build something like this if you want to. Here's a look at my lumber. I buy the lumber surfaced all four sides from my home center, and 4x4s, some 5/4 material. I really like this 5/4 material for this project. It's about 1 1/8 inches, and it's really sturdy, really robust, and I thought it fit the design of this chair nicely. So this is all New Zealand pine, and what I'll do is start off by marking up the ends. I'm not always these come pretty square, pretty true, but I usually will take the end off because it's a little bit rough to make it nice and clean, especially if I'm going to have a butt joint somewhere where it butts right up against another piece. Like in this case, these rails will butt up against the leg. So I know that a lot of miter saws or compound miter saws have the stop blocks. I still like to lay things out with the ruler, and stop blocks are okay, but I have had some trouble sometimes with them lining up on longer pieces. Could just be my setup or my saw, but I like laying everything out and making sure the lines are true and square. And there are some times when I'll use a stop block if I'm cutting shorter pieces or I have like 16 or 20 things to cut, but this is how I'm laying these out. So we'll head over to the miter saw here and trim up the ends. Here we're cutting the rails, and I take my time to go nice and slow through this. There's a decent carbide tip blade in here, and you true up the ends really square and put in a little bit of extra effort now. Make sure your saw is in square, and this effort will really help down the road when you start assembling your chair and everything is nice and accurate. So here we're cutting the same thing, the 5/4 by 6 inches, and these are also the rails. So we'll true up one end and then cut the individual boards out of it. See, I made a little tick mark on the cut side of my lines. That's good practice to get into. So you cut on the right side and you have all these the right length. I like to go down through it nice and slow so I get a really clean cut. So it's important that all of these are the 2 rails and 2 stiles for the side. I'm sorry, the 4 rails for the side. You want to make sure they're all nice and accurate. These are the stiles that will go in between the 2 rails and the side. So we want to make sure they're perfectly even and the same length. So here is the 4x4 chunk of white wood that I'm using. You can see I marked 2 lines on here. My blade is exactly an 1/8 inch thick. Double check your blade. Most of them are like that, but you have some that have a thinner kerf. But I marked both lines so I can cut this. This is an 8-foot piece of wood, so I will cut it at 23 7/8, and that allows for me to take 1/8 of an inch off in the cut, so I get 4 legs out of it. So this is what the side of the Morris chair is going to look like. You'll have 2 legs on each side, 2 rails, and then you'll have these 4 stiles in between that will have a little carving in them as well. But I'm kind of mimicking the classic Morris style chair. There's a lot of different ways to put the stiles in there. So here is a cool little centering device I made to get the center of something. So here what I'm going to do is the first time on a leg, I want to lay out exactly where everything is going to go. And this will primarily help me set up the center points for my drill, to drill through the legs to put the bolts in there. I'm going to hold this chair together, at least the legs, with 6-inch lag bolts. Big, pretty good size lag bolts, 5/16 inch lag bolts. And it's pretty strong. Not pretty, it's really strong when they go into that end grain, about 4 inches. It holds nicely. So I want to take the time to lay everything out. I like to do this full size on the actual leg. I think it helps me encounter any issues and helps me to make sure that I know where everything is going to go on the leg and how everything will fit. Like right there, I just measured the width of that wrong, so I had to go back and redo it. It helps to see where your bolts are going to go as well. You'll see a little bit later that the lag bolts have to offset on each side of the leg because they're going in two different directions. So that's how it lays out, and I know where everything goes. So for most of my projects, what I really like to do is make a template. And for this, the positioning of the lag bolt holes for each of these, this template is really helpful. I'm making 2 of these chairs, and so we have a set for our living room. And I have to transfer these holes onto 8 legs and do it on all these different sides. So the template is helpful. I will also tell you that the template is helpful just from a standpoint of next time I go to make a chair similar to this, I can use these templates because I kind of forget what I do sometimes. And while you can always go find the chair and measure it, it still doesn't put it down on paper like this to transfer onto other pieces of wood. Before I made this painted pine Morris chair, I made one out of solid oak, and that's just stained, and that went pretty well. But I'm using a lot of those components from that and a lot of the templates from that for this. The legs are a little bit different on this, so I had to redo this. So this kind of shows where I'm going to put the bolts. And I did change this, you'll see in the end, where only 2 is really necessary on both of these rails going across here. So I'm showing, I initially thought I was going to do 3, but I thought that was just overkill. And once I put the bolts in, they were amazingly strong. So we'll just punch down through into that piece of cedar, and then all the rest of the pieces will have accurate hole markings to drill down. So I want these center pieces to be equally spaced on the edge of the chair. And if you remember, I have a leg here and a leg right here. So I want these to be equally spaced, and I'm going to do that based on their centers. So let's clear a little bit of space here, and here's all I have to do. I'm going to take this and I'm going to find the center. So this is 3 1/2, so that's 1 3/4. And I'll do that on both sides. We'll set that out here. We'll do the same with 1 on the other side. 1 3/4. 1 3/4. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. If I want to have these equally spaced not only in the middle but also on the outside, I have to pretend like there is another piece, right on the edge of where my post would be, or my leg, and then I can equally space them. So I'm going to need this will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equal spaces in between to get these 4. Alright, so this was just for demonstration purposes. We only need 4. So what I'm going to do my best here to line this up with the edge, and I'm going to move this one all the way out to the very edge here, all the way out to the very edge here, and then for right now we can just get rid of these. Okay, so to make this a little bit easier, I'm also going to take this extra piece of stock and put this over here. This will make sense in just a little bit. And I want to find the center on here, 1 3/4. It'll be somewhere down here. Okay, so now all I have to do is measuring from this top point here, or anywhere I guess along this line would be okay. Anywhere on this line, I'm just going to take my ruler, use a diagonal to something that is divisible by 5. And when I lay this out here, it looks like probably the best is going to be 35. So if I have one of my marks right here, and I want to put that right on 35, again this is on the center of this because I want these two align on their centers. And I'll line this right up on this side. So this is on 35, and 35 divided by 5 equal spaces would be 7. So all I have to do now is I just have to let me get a square here. I'll grab this big carpenter's framing square, and all I need to do now is find my first division, which would be 7. Make sure this doesn't move. Moved a little bit. Make sure that's still on 35. There we go. And then I just find that 7, I'll mark right there. And then I want to do the same thing. I'm going to find 14 coming off the square on the bottom here. Mark 14. Come over this way. We're going to mark 21. And lastly, this will be a little bit tricky, we're going to mark 28. Seven times 4. Okay, so with that, we now have equally spaced pieces here. I've done this when building a fence too. This is how you can center your pickets in between different fence posts. So from here to here, this is 7 inches, 7 inches, 7 inches, 7 inches, 7 inches. Now if I just take all of this extra stuff away and find my centers, I'll center these by eye right now. Now they have an equal space here, 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 and here because of how we laid that out. Now I'll just find my centers on these pieces here, transfer these lines down here, basically just by bringing this together, transfer those lines, and then that's how I will put these supports in the middle, equally spaced. All right. Alright, the legs are cut out of a 4x4, just a huge chunk of probably Douglas fir. They say it can be fir or pine or spruce. They call it a whitewood. But you can usually find some pretty decent pieces, and it's all one solid piece, which I really like. So I'm going to take an 8-foot piece, and I'm going to cut it into 4 legs that are exactly 23 7/8. So it'll be 2-foot chunks, but you need 1/8 of an inch for the saw blade.
So you want to go nice and slow, and it'll cut a really, really nice clean cut with your carbide tip blade. Okay, so on the legs, next what I'm going to do, before I drill all the holes and everything, I'm going to show you how I put kind of the bottom taper on it, or the foot on this. Okay, so for the leg, what I want to do is ease the bottom a little bit. Here's a sample of how it's going to look. It's a prototype that I built. So this will be what the final chair will look like. It will have paint on it, white paint, and then just a little bit of the edges kind of scuffed up, just to roughen it up a little bit. But I wanted to keep kind of the chunkiness that is traditional to the Morris chair, but I didn't like just the straight square feet that most of them have. So I just tapered it a little bit, and I made a template for that. So it's a couple of cuts on the bandsaw. So on here, what I will do is measure up 4 inches. And this will just give me a reference point here, so I know where that 4 inches is. I thought this was a good end because there's quite a knot in there, a good sized knot. Hopefully it doesn't go in too far, but I'll be cutting some of that off. So then I have the template here. Line it up with the bottom, and then we'll trace this out. Just get it so it tapers up to that 4-inch mark there. Bring this one up as well. I'll still taper this up with the disc sander, but just to give myself a reference point here. So I'll have to make the same cuts over here, but I won't add my lines yet because I'm going to cut this off first, and then I'll have to lay the template over the cut area. So we'll go to the bandsaw and make this hefty 3.5-inch cut. Now I've traced my line from the template on this side, and I'll cut these out. Be careful, this can rock a little bit when you're cutting through. Alright, now we'll take it over to the disc sander and touch it up. Okay, so with a clean belt, really all we want to do is take off most of these bandsaw marks and taper it up into here. Alright, so that makes pretty quick work of it, makes it nice and smooth. I'll still taper these edges. I'll show you that in a little bit. And taper these, round these over a little bit. It's already tapered. And then we'll hit this with a scraper and then just a little bit of that, was it 60 or 80 grit sandpaper so that the paint sticks to it nice. So once we have the leg tapers done by the feet, all I'm going to do is take a block plane and round over all of these edges. Just make sure that they're about 3/8 of an inch rounded over consistently. The wood, when it comes from the lumber yard or the home center, is about 3/4 of an inch. Some places it's about 1/4 of an inch, so I like to make these a little bit wider. And you can take this and round it, just take your block plane and round it over the edge, or you can also take a spoke shave, and that works pretty well too. Just keep it at a little bit of an angle, make sure it's nice and sharp. What I like to do is take it down to about 1/4 of an inch, like that. So this is about 1/4 of an inch, and then so that'd be about 45 degrees, and then come back to about 22.5. A couple of passes that way, a couple passes that way. and then even that all out. And then for the very end, you can use your block plane. I just like to chamfer that edge a little bit. Turn your plane this way. Just kind of slide across and down. Just knock that off a little bit, so if it ever gets hit, it won't chip out or break. I'm going to put pads on the feet here, but it still could be hit, so just smooths it out a little bit. And then the last thing I do is just to take these super smooth knife marks and gently, just a little bit, not too much though, I still like that little beveling in there. You'll see that when I paint it and sand it, you want to have some of these hard edges in here from the different knife cuts. But I'll smooth this out a little bit so that the paint sticks to it a little bit better as well. Alright, so we'll move on to do all 4 legs and go on from there.